Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. And I am very excited to be here with friend and candidate for the state legislature of West Virginia, Robyn Kincaid. Good morning, Robyn. How are you?
Good morning, Jocelyn. It's so nice to be with you this morning.
And I should have added in her introduction that she is a progressive media superstar and the first trans woman to run for the state legislature in West Virginia. How does it feel?
It's really exciting. Came around to making this decision. I knew that it would come trepidation and some pitfalls, and well, perhaps even some bigotry and viciousness. But we have to stride into the future, and I want to be part of that future.
Well, so we talked in the pre-show like how much we met before you were out.
Oh, yes.
So what is this? And you've been in political media for 20 years, over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
What has this journey been like? Only if you want to share.
Oh, no. I'm happy to share. I've done, once upon a time, it was Head On with Bob Kincaid, and I was Bob. But Robyn is actually my birth name.
Oh.
And I kept it when I transitioned because growing up, I got teased a lot. Boys and girls alike in school would say, "Oh, Robyn's a girl's name." And it's not. And so when I finally decided to transition, and I think any trans person could tell you that you don't necessarily transition when you want to. If that had been possible, I would have transitioned in 1975. You don't transition when you want to. You transition when you have to. And I got to the have to part in 2020. And so a lot of trans people change their names, choose something that's special to them. But I decided to keep mine because all of those years of having all those kids saying, "Ew, Robyn's a girl's name." Well, yeah, it is. And so I transitioned in September 2020, and I told my radio audience about it on New Year's Eve 2020 with the assistance of a dear, dear friend of mine. She's my big sis. We actually went to high school together, and neither one of us knew about the other.
What?
And I found out about her, and she was like, "Oh, how you doing?" And I was still closeted. And I said, "Oh, great, yada, yada." And then on a private message, I said, "Yeah, me too." And she wrote back and said, "No." I said, "Yes." And so she's been a big help to me all along. And, well, it is a challenge. It's a big challenge, but I'm very fortunate. The radio community that we built has been incredibly supportive, and surprisingly, maybe I shouldn't have been, but I live in a magnificent little community in West Virginia. It's in the heart of the New River Gorge National Park. And when I came out, the community around me was just absolutely supportive. They've been there for me. They are kind and loving, and the most important thing in the world, accepting. And that's why I decided that I wanted to run for this office, because Jocelyn, right now, it is occupied by probably the single most transphobic, homophobic, disgusting bigot in the entire state of West Virginia. And I have to think in this district that we are better than that.
And I think they are. I mean, we've spoken about this at a few networks now, that there is this stereotype that the South and or rural America writ large are this bigoted, evangelical space. And I think it's one that we as Southerners internalize sometimes and think, "Oh, there's no space for me here. There's no room for me here." But the reality is that's a myth propagated by elitist coastal media sources. The reality is far more complex. There is tons of acceptance and progressive space in all across America. The people that are the bigots are the representatives of these highly gerrymandered districts, which don't reflect the will of the American people whatsoever. And so I wanted
And
to.
I tell people a lot that um, to be liberal behind what I call the cornpone curtain. But we persist. And West Virginia has a history of progressive politics. The mine wars that were fought here in the early parts of the 20th century, this was a state that had one of the strongest union movements in the entire country. But it was overtaken, and it was overtaken very cynically with a lot of money and a lot of hate. And so what you find out, it all begins about 2000 with Charlton Heston holding up a musket in Beckley, West Virginia, saying the liberals and the Democrats are going to come eat your Bibles, and you can have my gun when you pry it from my cold dead fingers. And that turned the tide, and we've been getting redder and redder and redder ever since. But you can't give up. You can't give up in the face of that. In fact, I think it calls upon us to be bolder and stronger. And so part of the reason that I want to make history, I've already made history by even filing to run, but I want to make history by getting my party's nomination in this district, and then really make history by putting my hand in the air, taking that oath, and taking that seat in the legislature. Because frankly, Jocelyn, I think and we have a Republican supermajority in this legislature, and frankly, they're bullies. That's all they are, is bullies. And I figure if they want to talk trash on people who aren't precisely cis heteronormative like them, then they need to look someone like me in the eye to do it.
Well, and I mean, it's really interesting because as you're talking, I'm like, in so many ways, Democrats have dropped the ball, and they have dropped the ball for trans people. They have dropped the ball for Southerners, including, people who might not vote progressive, and handed our power over to these reactionary, bigoted Republicans at every turn. Because the reality is, you're absolutely correct, Robyn. How many of these people who spew anti-trans hate across this country write these just I don't even know where to start with the anti-trans legislation being introduced right now. But how many of these people actually know anyone who's trans? They probably don't, because they're existing in these incredibly cis hetero silos. And I mean, I'm with you. Representation matters. Even if I didn't know you to be the incredibly competent, progressive, intelligent woman you are, it is still important that we have more and more people in Congress who represent the United States. And how sad is it that you're the first trans woman to even file to run, or that Danica Rome in 2018 was the first elected trans state? She was in the state Congress, right? I can't remember her district.
Yeah, she's in the Virginia legislature.
Okay, yeah, and it's that wasn't that long ago.
No.
And like a lot of queer historians are doing an amazing job of writing these amazing books about trans people have been with us since the beginning of time. This is not a new issue. And again, Democrats are dropping the ball on this. We're making this into like a trendy hot button issue. It's not. Nothing about this is trendy. And fundamentally, people should have a right over their own bodies and their own destiny, regardless of gender identity. Like we were talking about this in the pre-show. When I hear all of these things that are happening in Texas, that are happening in Florida, I don't understand how, even as a libertarian who doesn't care about social issues, you wouldn't be terrified. The precedent being set of the federal government or the state government telling you what you can and can't do with your body, how your children can and can't dress, what values you bring in your personal private life should be nobody else's business.
No, it shouldn't be. And frankly, it points up the monumental hypocrisy of the Republican Party at this point in time. Because if for instance you want to go to some rally and spew COVID particles all over each other, barking and grunting and hooting about my body, my choice, well, that was simply a mockery of the struggle of women to maintain autonomy over their own reproductive systems and their own choices. But you also can't talk about small government if you want government big enough to tell a child that they have to live for the rest of their lives inauthentically, and in fact to steal from them, because that's what these anti-sports bills are, to steal from them a portion of the public education that they are guaranteed as a matter of law. And ordinarily, I would have thought, because I also have I have a law degree, don't practice, but in the past, I would have simply said, well, this will wend its way up to the Supreme Court, and then they'll straighten this all out. But we have 6 wild-eyed jurisprudential maniacs from the Federalist Society on that bench now, and I've lost all confidence in that. And the thing is, the Republicans, Jocelyn, they also know what's up there too, and so they start out with these anti-sports bills, or who can go to the potty where, and then they start talking about whether children who are trans can get gender-affirming care. And now they've taken the next step. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a sort of one-upsmanship that takes place with this kind of legislation, and it's all coming out of legislative chop shops that are 501c3 tax-exempt organizations, eating away at the commons. But all these bills are coming out of those chop shops, the Family Values Coalition for Godly Virtues or whatever. And it starts out bad enough and it goes worse. So in Idaho right now, they're contemplating a bill that, in addition to eliminating medical and therapeutic care for trans kids, it also says that it will be a felony with a penalty of life imprisonment for parents to take their trans child across state lines to get gender-affirming care. It is no coincidence that similar language has been introduced in Missouri in regard to a woman who wants to leave Missouri to go and get an abortion.
Well, and I love that you are bringing up the connection between these two, because it's not one that people are drawing nearly enough, right? And it's just about shaming and controlling people who are not cis heterosexual men. That's like at the root of it.
Well, absolutely. And for me, it's maybe I see these connections a little bit more clearly because, like I said, you don't transition when you want to. You transition when you have to. And I got to the have to point, like I said, in 2020. And I looked all over West Virginia trying to find someone who would prescribe me my hormones. I mean, it was a have to. It wasn't a want to. It was existential. And lo and behold, I found Planned Parenthood. Because Planned Parenthood, in addition to all of the other wonderful things they do for women's health, they make it possible for people like me to live. They provided life-saving care for me by giving me my first prescriptions for the female hormones that I needed for my transition.
I'm really glad that was there. And I mean, that's finding any form of medical care in this country is already just a Sisyphusian task too frequently. But when you think about the number of people who are struggling in silence or even struggling with loving community to get the medical care they need, it's tragic. And, these statistics are cited all the time, but like trans medical interventions is suicide prevention. It's, people just having their pronouns acknowledged makes a huge,
oh my God, pronouns.
Like, so can you, I should have asked this initially for people who don't know, could you just give a brief overview of what's happening in Texas and Florida for people who don't understand?
Well, absolutely. And it's not, like I said, it's started previously. It started with bathroom bills that somehow biology is destiny, and a child who is gender nonconforming still has to take their lives into their hands and go to, a trans girl has to go to the boys' bathroom and perhaps get the stuffing beaten out of her. It started with that, and then it moved into sports, school sports, which are a portion of a child's educational experience. And they want to make sure that trans kids can't participate in high school sports because, and let's be clear, they don't care about the trans boys. Mm-hmm. All right. In fact, the bill that was passed and signed into law in West Virginia last year specifically targeted trans girls. Didn't say a word about trans boys because they figure, if a trans boy wants to go and try to play football or boys basketball, that they'll just put them in their place. But they bark and grunt and hoot about these unfair advantages that don't exist if a child goes on puberty blockers, because all that testosterone production and all that the growth that takes place under the influence of that doesn't happen. But then they went on from that, and Alabama started it last year, as did Arkansas and Idaho, saying that they wanted to ban the ability of a trans child to have life-affirming, gender-affirming care in the form of, and they give this laundry list of medical procedures that, Jocelyn, simply aren't done. Nobody out there is doing doing gender confirmation surgery on 12-year-olds. I mean, zero. Okay, none. It's medically unethical. But they also list the puberty blockers, and they list hormones. Even if the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatric Endocrinology, the American Child Psychology, the American Psychiatric Association all say that gender-affirming care is life-saving. Because one of the facts about trans children is that somewhere on the order of 40% of trans children have either contemplated or tried suicide. 40%. Now, what happens when you make gender-affirming care available to a trans child? It drops to around 4 to 6%, which means, in any other circumstance, that's a medical miracle. And so they want to take that away in places like Alabama and Idaho and so forth. And there are children in those states, in Texas, who are absolutely traumatized based upon an entirely specious attorney general's opinion by the indicted, accused federal felon Ken Paxton, the attorney general of Texas. Governor Greg Abbott, whom I've taken to referring to as Vlad Abbott because his position is exactly identical to that of Vladimir Putin. Governor Vlad Abbott directed the Department of Family Services in Texas to treat every case of a trans child being given appropriate treatment as a case of parental child abuse. Literally seeking to steal little trans children out of loving homes so that they can be handed over to some religious maniac or some conversion therapy, foster care system, what have you, and try to beat and torture the trans out of them. And let me just say, as a matter of, it's personal, I knew I was trans when I was very, very young. I didn't have the words, but I knew I didn't want to run and play with the boys. I wanted to run and play with the girls because I identified with the girls. And I did everything in my power to not be this. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go away. The only thing you can do is affirm it, and then the misery that comes with it does go away. I know this for a fact. The technical term is gender dysphoria. It means that you don't mentally and spiritually align with the gender you were assigned at birth. And some people describe it as being like having a stone in your shoe. If you go out hiking on a trail, you pick up a little stone. It's annoying every now and then. But if you get a good-sized little pebble, it will make you miserable. Mm-hmm. And having been in broadcast for many, many years, of course, I live with these. And they have over the years. I started in radio when I was, I think, 15. And I have tinnitus. and that's a constant ringing in your ears. Well, gender dysphoria is like tinnitus. Some days the ringing is not so bad, and other days it sounds like an air raid siren. But the most wonderful thing in the world, and I don't mind talking about this because I'm kind of an open book on it. You can ask anything, seriously. Last November, I had gender affirming surgery.
Oh, congratulations, Robyn.
Thank you. And the most amazing thing was about 2 days afterward, in the hospital, I kind of looked around. And went, where is it? Where is it? But all that conflict had disappeared. The dysphoria was gone. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. I felt complete. And I waited a half a century to do it. And so this, and eventually, if they can stop gender affirming care for little trans kids, they'll come for the grown-ups next, without a doubt. I mean, this is all that Pastor Niemöller stuff. You know, first they came for the trans kids, and I didn't stand up because I didn't have a trans kid. Then they came for the trans adults, and I didn't stand up for them because I wasn't a trans adult.
Well, and you know, as you're talking, I'm just struck by where I always land with this one, because I just, you know, I have, not that this matters, but I have a couple trans younger siblings, and it's been really disheartening to watch how Democrats in our family respond to it. Very disheartening. Because I think there's this idea that aggressive transphobia is just with, unfortunately, that's not true. I wish it were. But I think this is a really difficult issue for us to organize around, because a lot of people don't understand it and can't understand it. And, you know, and I think where I start to land with it is like, first of all, we need people like you in positions of power to be visible and powerful and telling your story and legislating and organizing. But I also think that, and tell me if I'm incorrect on this one, I think we as Democrats are missing this as a choice issue, because you're absolutely right. It's like, you know what, I think one of the problems we're doing is we're getting caught up in like the touchy-feeliness instead of like, listen, this is about choice. People have a choice to identify as they want to identify. People have a choice to get the health care that makes them feel sane. And, you know, oh, I don't get that. Who cares? Like, that's not,
right.
It's not your decision. And again, it's just such a dangerous precedent to be in the street, where if you get a wackadoodle governor, he can tell people what forms of medically researched and medically appropriate, whether it's, you know, therapies or surgical interventions are. I mean, what if like a governor started being like, you know what, I don't think cosmetic surgery is appropriate. I think it's vain. Nobody can get nose jobs anymore. It's like, I don't want a nose job, but I want people to be able to do whatever they want with their bodies. And I think it's just sort of astounding to me that because of transphobia in this country, everyone is in an outrage over this.
Oh, you're so right, because it's so easy and just because we've got a D behind our names or something like that doesn't mean we're immune. I live in a deeply religious state. Okay. I myself was dipped by the heel in the Southern Baptist Convention at a tender age, and it stuck. But there's people have transphobia preached at them from the pulpit when the Bible is actually, well, when the New Testament, you know, the part that matters, this should matter to Christians, is silent. But when we, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off. But what I'm saying is, there are Democrats who will say, well, you know, being trans is against my religion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to take your religion away from you. Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, you go out and be trans. I mean, there are no ads on TV that say, you know, ask your doctor if gender transition is right for you. Might be good if there were. But we get wrapped up. People get wrapped up in these issues, and these are issues that are born out of ignorance and fear, and it's multiplied, and it's a big part of why I am running, because I am steeped in that Southern biblical tradition, and Jocelyn, I can speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take, for instance, and I alluded to it earlier, if we take, for instance, the fact that somewhere between 1% and 2% of the entire population of the United States is trans.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, but it's also a very tiny percentage of the populace.
Yeah.
And if you think about Matthew 25, and when Jesus looks at those geniuses that ran around with him, and they were so smart. Do I get to sit at your right hand, Lord? No, me. I want a crown. And he patiently explains to them, listen, this isn't that hard. You got to feed the hungry. You got to house the homeless. You got to clothe the naked. You got to visit the sick and those people in prison. And what? Because again, not real bright. And he says, listen, if you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it also unto me. Well, you can't get much more least of these than 1% of the population of this country. So for all of these good God-fearing, upstanding, Bible-believing, Christ-centered, evangelical, fundamentalist, homosexual Christian Republicans out there, I just want to look at them and say, why do you hate Jesus?
That's an amazing question. See, this is one of the many reasons I want you in office. And I also want to circle back to something you said about surgery. You're absolutely correct. No one is operating on 12-year-olds. Nobody. Or, I mean, I don't want to, maybe some whack job doctor and I don't know. But, legally, nobody's allowed to do that. This is a very puberty blockers. I think we might have talked about this in the pre-show. As, it is like it's not much different than birth control, though, again, a lot of these people also hate birth control. Maybe that's a bad example, but puberty blockers literally just delay the hormonal transition process for young people so they can wrap their head around what's happening to them. And, it's some of the most disturbing part of the Texas legislation that is the idea that you can snitch on parents or teachers or providers who are affirming a child's gender search in any way. You can just by a kid could come to school, dressed as the gender that feels right to them, and a teacher can report on the parents. It's do we really want to create a world where parents are under that level of surveillance? That's terrifying.
Well, it is, and it's right now they can only see it as surveillance for people that they hate. But you also have to view this, going back to this choice issue that you raised. We have to view this within the light of the Texas bounty bill with regard to aiding and abetting a woman seeking an abortion. Well, that bounty language is now being used in regard to other issues as well. The bounty language is being used in Florida inside the "Don't Say Gay" bill. If a teacher utters the gay word, well, somebody can sue the teacher and the school board and get a payday out of it. But to go back to the issue of puberty blockers for just a second, we have to remember trans medicine is extremely underdeveloped. The trans community is understudied, frankly. But all these medications did not begin life as treatment for trans people. The puberty blockers, that, as we refer to them, started out as medications for men with prostate cancer. And they later found out that it would work on children with a condition called precocious puberty. And precocious puberty is basically when a child starts developing, maturing in terms of secondary sexual characteristics at too early a rate. The little girl who gets her first period at 8. or the little boy who can grow a Sam Waterston mustache at 9. Okay, those children get those blockers, and it allows them to have a childhood, because for children who do mature too early, it's actually dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It's socially dangerous. It's medically dangerous. It's physically dangerous. So once they've done away with the choice that a trans child and their loving trans parent can make, well, what's to say that some religious type doesn't say, well, maybe she got her period when she was 8 because God wants her to.
Well, yes. And, it's speaking of getting personal, I mean, we're also friends, so I'm running up against some stone cold patriarchy in my personal life because, I'm about to get married. And
oh, yeah. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations to you running for office, transitioning, all this good shit. Sorry, Brad. Good things. I'm so bad at that. So the reality is that it's like, I think about this a lot. How can we package the fight against patriarchy in a way that people understand this is important for all of us? And I feel the same way about the, queer rights, trans rights. People need to understand that people want to build a structure where people are easier to control. It is easier to control a society where half the people, women, feel that they're just frail, delightful, ornamental beings without opinion. It's, exactly. It is so much easier to control a population like that. It is so much easier to control a population where the numbers are getting bigger and bigger, but the something like 10 to 20% of the society which identify as queer in some way feel ashamed of themselves. And, not long ago, if you were queer, that was a way that foreign governments could blackmail government employees.
Sure.
Shame.
Compromat.
Shame is a way to keep people controlled. And what we need to understand, if you are in any way interested in a democratic society, is the reason that heavy patriarchy and fascism run hand in hand is because it is so much easier to manipulate a society when a solid portion of the population spends all their energy and all their psyche simply surviving and trying to protect their identity rather than using their intellect and their energy to flourish and create. And that's done intentionally. It is. Sorry, I'm going to let you talk.
No. You're absolutely right. And again, all of this is hand in glove stuff, Jocelyn. An ignorant, undereducated community is also much more malleable and controllable. Mm-hmm. And that is the reason that, say, for instance, in Florida, the anti-critical race theory bill is running parallel to the Don't Say Gay bill, is running parallel to the We Hate Trans Kids bill. Because if you can keep people ignorant as to the real history of this country, then they are more susceptible to what I call big outrage, which is right-wing media, whose only purpose is to keep people in a perpetual state of dither and dudgeon over manufactured crises. If we talk about critical race theory, and it cannot be said too many times, the only time someone actually gets taught about critical race theory is if they are in law school or in graduate level college classes. It's not in 3rd grade. It's simply not. But what it is it's a bumper sticker buzzword, and God knows the other side is so good at that. Bumper sticker buzzwords, buzz phrases. It's a way to get people to grunt and moan and stay in a perpetual state of absolute fury over something they neither understand nor are even interested in understanding. So because the actual history of this country, and you know it, I know you've read your Howard Zinn, is brutal, and it's bloody, and it's hateful, but that is not to say that there is not a noble history here. Oh my God, there's exquisitely noble history here. I was reading the other day a book, one of my favorite books about one of my heroines. It's called by a friend of mine named Jeff Biggers, called "The Trials of a Scold," and it's about basically America's first blogger. Her name, she came from Appalachia, what is now West Virginia. Her name was Anne Royal, and in the early 1800s, about the 1820s, she had her entire life stolen from her. And she had to go out and make her way in the world. And she was a travel writer. Mark Twain read her and learned the art of travel writing from what she wrote. And nobody knows her. But she was also very political. Mm. And in Washington, D.C., the very Washington, D.C. where you are, in the 1820s, I believe it was, she was charged and tried and convicted upon the charge of being a public scold, simply because she was telling the truth and printing a newspaper about the doings of the political elite there. And they were willing to dunk her in the Potomac River in a dunking chair and kill her.
What?
A Presbyterian minister and his mob attacked her one night, stole her printing press, and threw her down the stairs.
Ugh.
And I'm sorry. Can I not? If I were a teacher, could I not tell that story in a school? Because it might make some Presbyterian boy mad.
I want to read more about her now a lot. What's her name?
Anne Royal.
Anne Royal. So there's something that I really want to bring up, and I want to say this as carefully as I can, because it's so important. I love that you bring up all of the identity fights that are happening, that are being the wars waged against the stories of marginalized communities, especially the Black community in America, against trans community, against cis women, many of whom who align themselves with reactionary white nationalists, and I have a lot of thoughts on that as well. But only some cis women get to be defended. But I think I love that you tie those all together, because one thing I think we do terribly on the left is we pay right into the right wing's hands. We let it be all about identity. And, people who are critical of identity politics, I think, have a point, because we're messaging it terribly. It's like, no, this is not like one community deserves to have, feelings validated or something. No, our country has killed and murdered and disenfranchised economically and enslaved and abused and mutilated people for generations. This is not about touchy-feely, everybody validate everybody. And it really infuriates me that we have played into their hands on these things, because it is absolutely essential that everybody understand the history of Black people in this country, understand the history of why white families in the district have 4 times the net worth of Black families in the district, because that was done by the government. The government would not give Black families the loans and assets to buy homes until very recently, and even now there's still a bias. These are all things that shape our modern world. These aren't touchy-feely, sentimental Hallmark moments. And that brings me to the second thing that I think we need to be very cognizant of as progressives and activists. The thing they do, and they are so good at it, is they get us to react to the horrible things that they have done, and or the people who are advocating on behalf of these powerful systems. And then we look hysterical, emotional, crazy,
Oh, you know what? Here's a great example of that. Jocelyn, here's a great example of that. Over on the right, the pro-Putin right, they are absolutely girl crush fangirl over the Russian military because they say that they're manly and they're masculine, and they refer to these are Americans who refer to the American military as the they them military. And parroted, well, the military are plural, yes, they them. I do have an English degree, but they seem to think that we can't effectively slaughter people in their sleep because there might be some gender non-conforming members of the military. Honey, George Washington wore wigs and pantyhose. Okay, let's don't go there.
Well, and I mean,
you're so right. And the other part of it is all of these communities, the African American community, God, the indigenous community, Latinx, women as a whole are all hurting because the history is, while some of it is brilliant and beautiful and brave, the history is painful. And so what we do sometimes is we tend to get into what I call the trauma Olympics.
Yes.
And when we start talking to each other and trying to, rather than empathetically talk about the things that matter, but instead try to claim our piece of ground on the hill, then we make the other side's job 1,000 times easier. And you're right, and we're kind of horrible at messaging.
So bad. They're like, you guys are identity politics and you're obsessed with identity. We're like, that's right, we are. It's like, no, we're not. The reason oppression against trans people matters is because, first of all, individual trans people matter. Duh. That goes, the pro-life community. It's weird we have to validate that. But it also is an expression of an oppression that is iterated against pretty much everybody. Unless you are a wealthy, like multi-millionaire white dude, you should be scared by the things that happen to communities in this country. Do you seriously think that the government, which murders Black men for existing with police who get off, you think that those police officers wouldn't do the same thing to you, given even like the slightest provocation? And, I had a libertarian friend once who was trying to make the argument that, the American police force kills innocent white men as much as innocent Black men. I was like, you're not making the point you think you're making. It's like, great. So defund the police is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, right. You mean the police kill innocent people all the time? Really?
Yeah.
Well, and I have a question, and trans woman to cis woman messaging. Can we start referring to Republican women who support having their own rights taken away from them as self-hating women?
Thank you.
Pretty please.
I was just writing about this before we got onto our pre-show. Yes.
You write so lovely, brilliantly.
Thank you, Robyn. I really appreciate that.
You're a brilliant essayist.
I really appreciate that. I mean, seriously, I think it's because a lot of times, sometimes as feminists, we want to let everyone off the hook. Like, well, they have internalized misogyny. I have to be honest, I grapple with that in the era of a Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's kind of like there, so much horrendous white supremacy has been propagated by women. And as white women, I think it's a betrayal of our sisters who have been marginalized by the violence of this country to be like, yeah, but all us girls together. It's like, no. And I do think it's slightly more complicated than Republican men, because I do think a lot of these white supremacist Republican women are trying to get power the only way they think they know how, which is through the approval of white supremacist men fine. Okay. That's an interesting psychological dynamic to talk about, but I don't think it in any way should minimize the violence they do.
No, and just to loop back to something that we talked about earlier, the two pieces of legislation in Idaho and Missouri, where they want to make it a felony for a woman to leave the state to get an abortion, and in Idaho make it a felony with a term of life in prison to take your trans child out of state to get gender affirming care. Jocelyn, both of those pieces of legislation were introduced by Republican women. Now, what are we supposed to think about that? And I used to talk about it before I transitioned, and I'm still talking about it now. And that is this. I remember the brutal fields of fire of the 2016 Democratic presidential campaign. And I remember that phrase, and I was supportive of it. We need a woman president. That ceiling must be shattered. I believed it then, and I believe it now. I'm there with what, years ago they asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how many women do you think should be on the Supreme Court of the United States? And she took a minute, and she smiled. She said, 9. I'm there. But if we just generically say we need a woman president, does that mean that we're all going to be out in the streets cheering and declaring the end of misogyny and the end of sexism if the first woman president is Marjorie Taylor Greene?
And
does that not just give you the shivering horrors?
I love that you're bringing that up because, I think, I stopped watching Handmaid's Tale because it was a little too triggering after a certain point. But I love that that is a through line in Handmaid's Tale, that it's like, hey, I know that you on the left like to pretend that patriarchy is this thing that's upheld by men alone, but that's demonstrably false at every step of the way. There have been women, particularly white women, almost exclusively white women, who are willing to trade in their sisters, especially their sisters of color, for more cachet, more approval tokens from their white supremacist boss, husbands, policymakers.
Who provided the wherewithal to put up all of those hateful Confederate memorial statues all over the South, Jocelyn?
Daughters of the Confederacy. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, sister.
Thank you, seriously. And, if anyone hasn't read Gone with the Wind, it's hard for me to recommend that you guys do at this point because perfect example, written by a Southern woman. And it actually makes me sad because Margaret Mitchell sounds like she was kind of someone who maybe had she been born in a different community era would have turned out different. But that novel, popularized in the 20th century, one of the first best-selling Hollywood, wasn't it like the first film in color or something that was popular? It was early.
It might have. Actually, the first color film was about our little corner of Appalachia.
Really?
It's called The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. And I think that was or maybe the first Technicolor film. But, there were all kinds of firsts that went with Gone with the Wind. But look, the first great film, the first film screened at the White House was D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation.
Exactly. And that was going to be my next point. It's like, right, it's, this whole feminine mystique and nostalgia around Southern womanhood that lionizes the KKK. We cannot let white women off the hook for that. In the pursuit of some fictional form of feminism, Susan B. Anthony, who started out as an abolitionist, turned on the movement when she started to feel that Black men, which, correctly, were going to get the vote before women. So she said, wait, never mind. Screw that. And it's pathetic and it's sad. And I don't think there is anything to be gained by editing that out.
No, look at the giant divide that opened at Seneca.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we look at women's history, we have to be honest that no, women who want power are not universally good. Men who want power aren't universally good. Why is that something that we even have to point out?
I don't know, and I kind of feel funny with that concept of wanting. I'm running for office. I've held elective office in the past, but I'm not seeking power.
Yeah.
With the way the West Virginia legislature works, there are 100 members. That means that each delegate represents roughly 1% of the state population. And 1% of the population of West Virginia is trans. And at this point in time, Democrat or Republican, I have precisely zero representation in my government. So I'm running, and my campaign slogan is simply for all of us. And I want to have a conversation with anybody that wants to talk to me. And I want to make I want to make this place better, because there's so much to love about West Virginia, but there's so very much that's wrong. And I'm not controlled by anyone. I'm a what's the Japanese word for a samurai with no master? Ronin. Yeah, girl Ronin.
Thanks, Brad.
But I think, and by the way, like I said, we've got probably more trans kids in West Virginia per capita than any other state in the union, for whatever reason, and they have to be protected. And frankly, they're not. They could stand a whole lot more protection, because somebody else will be next.
Also, you know what? Unpopular opinion. So, I'm the oldest of 6 siblings, and when I'm taught, and a lot of them are a lot younger than me. And like, this is probably an overshare, but I know they're very, very want to be as open as possible about all this. That it's been really hard to watch them be gaslit by family members. Like, oh, well, how do you know? How do you know? Are you sure? Are you going to regret this? Like, regret what? They're just exploring their identity. And a world where we can be safer for people to explore their identity, it's like one of the most gaslighty things I hear to all queer kids. It's like, well, what if it's a phase? What if it is a phase? Like, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with people, thinking, well, maybe I like women, or maybe I like guys, or maybe I identify as something else?
Well, I can tell you, this is the longest phase I've ever been in.
Well, and we gaslight kids so much, and it's so hard to see kids who are young and are trying to explore themselves, like, be shamed for something that they should have every right to introspect on freely. And you know what? Guess what? Like, I don't know anyone who's ever changed their entire gender identity and then been like, actually, never mind. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but it's nothing I've ever experienced or heard of. And
yeah, antiquing is a lifestyle. Trans is an identity.
And
one thing that we need out there is we need to do a better job of mentoring. I call myself a trans granny because I'm 59 years old, and sometimes people just need to talk to somebody who is outside, just outside their immediate zone, and just need to be heard and need to be validated. The idea of if it's a phase, or it's a trend, or how do you know? The great comeback to how do you know is, how do you know you're cis?
I mean, exactly, though.
Because, see, all this crap goes back to days when people, during the debate over gayness, well, gay is a choice. And the answer to that is always, well, what morning did you wake up and decide that you were going to choose to be straight?
Right. And it's this compulsive heterosexuality is a really disturbing thing when you says about what it says about who we are and how we relate to other people's identities in personal life. Like, why do you need your attraction to be validated by everyone else sharing your attraction? Like, if you generalize it gets weird real quick. Like, okay, so you're attracted to your partner. Do you need everybody to be attracted to your partner?
Right. Yeah. Have you ever bitten into a green persimmon? It's not a pleasant experience. Right. But just because you bit a green persimmon doesn't mean that the rest of us have to validate your green persimmon biting.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. I knew this was going to happen. We're already almost at time. And I want to give you a chance to tell people how they can get involved with your incredibly exciting campaign.
Thank you, Jocelyn. We're still working on the electronic fundraising. God, we are poor as Job's turkey and brokered in the 10 Commandments. But you can reach us with checks or money orders made payable to Robyn for All at Robyn for All, P.O. Box 958, Beaver, Beaver, West Virginia 25813. And just to plug the program, if you're not doing anything between 5 and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, go to HeadOn.Live, check out the program, engage in the conversation. I do this for 3 hours a night and have for nearly 20 years. And I think we need another hour at some point, Jocelyn.
I would love that. So unfortunately, God is punishing us for our sacrilegious thoughts. You kind of glitched when you were saying the address. Do you mind repeating it just so people have it?
Sure. Robyn for All, and checks and money orders made to pay that payable that way. Robyn for All, P.O. Box 958, Beaver, Beaver, West Virginia 25813.
Awesome.
Did we get it that time?
Yes.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much, Robyn. I would love to have you. Oh, and when are your campaign deadlines? Like when is this race, etc.?
The primary is May the 10th. I do have competition for my primary.
Okay.
But I feel like this is just kind of a moment of destiny.
Awesome.
And it's desperation too, because I'm desperate to raise enough money to start buying yard signs and pay for electronic media.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Robyn. We will definitely have you on again.
What a joy. I've so enjoyed it.
Me too.
Let's talk soon. Online or off, I don't care.
I would love that. Robyn Kincaid, everyone, you can, again, please donate to her campaign and catch her show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank